Welcome to another episode of Pirkei Avot, and today we're going to be doing Mishnas 12 and 18, and as Michael will tell us, we're going to be discussing the famous icons of the Mishna and the Gemara, Hillel and Shammai. So before I forget, let's dedicate this episode in memory of Elisheva bat Levy and Levy ben Moshe Esther, and also dedicate this episode to Tzivia bat Moshe Esther. Okay, Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Rabbi Sheikh. So in these the next pair, we come to a very famous pair, Hillel and Shammai, the two most famous people in Mishnah, apart from Rabbi Akiva. They are mentioned together more than 300 times in the Mishnah. Sometimes disagreeing about various halachic subjects, but they apparently agreed more than they disagreed. So let's talk about Hillel for a second. Hillel, he came from Bovel. He was a descendant of David HaMelech through his father. He would eventually found a dynasty that would control Jewish life and rabbinic decisions for approximately 200 years. His grandson was Rabbi Gamliel HaZoken. Rabbi Gamliel HaZoken's son was Shimon, and his son was another Rabban Gamliel, who was around the same time as Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Eliezer bar Harkanas. So he was born approximately 110 BCE. He apparently lived to 120 years old, like two other people, Moshe Rabbeinu and Rabbi Akiva. So Hillel came from Bovel. Bovel at the time was not the house, the kind of area of study, that it was more of a backwater as regards any sort of rabbinic importance. In fact, that's why he decided to leave Bovel, because he didn't feel that he could achieve the heights that he wanted to, that he set out for himself in a place that didn't have any respected scholars at that point. They would, in 300-400 years later, it would be the epicenter of study. So at approximately 70 BCE, at 40 years old, he decided to move to Israel. He traveled to Israel and wanted to enter the yeshiva of Shammai and Avtalion, who we mentioned in the last lesson. He was initially refused, as he was just a man from Bovel, and he was a kind of stranger to this house of study. And the Gemara tells a story of that night when he was refused entry into the yeshiva of Shammai and Avtalion. He tried to sleep on the roof, and it was snowing. The students inside noticed him there, brought him into the yeshiva, where he spent the next 40 years studying at the feet of Shammai and Avtalion. What a great thing to happen. He ended up being their most prominent disciple. At this time, this was during the reign of Herod the Great. This was at the tail end of the Hasmonean dynasty. Things have deteriorated for the Hasmoneans, and there were a lot of disputes between the Sadducees and Perushim. So Hillel had taken the torch of Shammai and Avtalion, and he was considered an exemplar over the Perushim, the Pharisees. He was the first person known to have set up a kind of yeshiva, like a base Shammai. We know of Hillel and Shammai, but we also later know about Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. So he was credited with setting up the first organized, formal house of study that would span centuries. He was the first of the Tanoim to set up one of these sorts of institutions, the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel. So it's a little known fact that Shammai and Hillel were not the same age. Hillel was 50 years older, or rather Shammai was 50 years younger than Hillel. He was born obviously when Hillel was about 50, so he only turned 15 or 16 when they both became kind of contemporaries. So there's a big age difference that people perhaps are not aware of. Apparently a bas kol emerged or was heard and declared that the only law that counts is the law that Hillel. I think we go by the law of Hillel rather than Shammai when we decide on cases. So, but in between the time, because there was a big age difference, in between the time that Hillel died and the time the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, a lot of the laws were determined by the Beis Shammai. There was a story told of, in this period, of a Gemara in Shabbos, based on a Mishna, about a rabbi who was trying to decide certain laws. He retired to his residence with students, and out of this one day of judicial arguments, 18 different laws were decided according to Beis Shammai. So with this we understand that Beis Shammai was the most dominant force at that time, after Hillel had died and before this gap of years between them and the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. So Hillel and Shammai, Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, had different styles of learning, but were not too different from each other. Hillel, when he was alive, was a Nossi, and Shammai was the Av Beis Din. But once Hillel had died, it was very unusual that they did not appoint. Shammai was made the Nossi, but he was such a great rabbi that they did not appoint an Av Beis Din to sit alongside him. This was in approximately 30 CE. Eventually, when Shammai died, Rabban Gamaliel Hazoken took over from him, which was the grandson of Hillel. So the judicial kind of power was back in with Beis Hillel. So what do we know about them? What does the Mishna say? Let's start. So starts Hillel v'Shammai kiblu mehem. Hillel and Shammai received it from them. Hillel Omer Havei mitlamidam shel Aharon Ohev Shalom v'Rodef Shalom Ohev et Habrios Umar Kaban la Torah. Hillel and Shammai received the tradition from them. Hillel used to say, "Be of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them close to the Torah." So what does this mean? It is unusual that Hillel quoted Aaron. So he was you could tell that he was a lover of peace himself, because he didn't just use the chance to talk about his philosophy. He actually attributed it to somebody else, which is a very respectful thing to do. He said, as House of Hillel would say, love peace and chase after peace. So he was very humble in the respect that he was submissive to something that preceded him, and he credited knowledge of the house of Aaron. So that's a very, very nice thing. So what is shalem? Peace. What is it? Shalem, it comes from the root completeness. It's like two pieces of a jigsaw. When you want to make shalom with somebody, it's very rare that you can't say I'm at peace with myself, but I don't like the other guy. You have to find a compromise, and sometimes you both have to find that kind of jigsaw fit together, which neither of you are, it's kind of squared off to each other. You have to find this sort of a balance, a compromise between yourselves. This, like Aaron, we learn in like the kind of Avos to Rav Nosson, which was the kind of the other type of Pirkei Avos. He would talk about Aaron when he wanted to make peace. He would go to one party and say, that the other guy that you're having a problem with, he's talked to me and he's so upset that that you're feeling this way and that you're having this broigus with him. He doesn't want to leave the house in case he sees you. And the guy would say, oh my God, I didn't realize this. Of course I'll make peace. And he would go to the other guy and he would say, look, this guy, he's so upset that you are not talking to him. You must try and make peace. He goes, of course, if he's feeling like that, I must make peace. So he was almost telling a white lie. But what we know is that it doesn't matter if you tell a white lie, a sheker, in regards to making peace, because you're allowed to tell a white lie in order to make peace. So let's look at what Rambam says in regards to these Mishnayot. He says, regarding of the disciples of Aaron, they said that when Rambam actually quotes what the story that I just told, but I'll put it. Rambam's words are probably a lot better than mine. He says, on the disciples of Aaron, they said, the fathers, according to Rav Nathan, that's of us to Rav Nosson, that when Aaron sensed that the insides of a person were bad, or they told him that his insides were bad, or that he had a sin in his hand, he would greet him first and would be friendly towards him and would speak much with him. And that man would become embarrassed about himself and say, woe is me. If Aaron knew what is hidden in my heart and the evil of my actions, he would not permit himself to even look at me, all the more so to speak to me. And yet he treats me with the presumption that I am a proper man. Hence I will confirm his words and his thoughts and will return to good. And he would become from his students who learn from him. And Hashem stated that when Hashem described him with his trait in Malachi 2 verse 6, he walked with me in peace and righteousness and brought many back from iniquity. And it is this famous matter about him that Hillel had in mind. And he also said that when a man's name spreads for greatness, its termination will be announced. And he would also say that Hashem kills the one who doesn't read the Bible much, but the one who does not learn at all is fitting to be killed, as we will read later in the Mishna. And he said of the ones who uses the crown will die, meaning to say one who earns a livelihood from Torah and receives tangible benefit from it. And this was his intention in his statement, as will be explained in the tractate in Rambam on Pirkei Avot 4:5. So what is he talking about? Let's continue with the Mishnah. This is referring to the Mishnah in the next Mishnah, number 13, what he just commented on. We'll start the Mishnah. Hu haya omer noged shema oved shmei. Hillel also used to say in Aramaic, this is an Aramaic saying, he who makes his name great causes his name to be destroyed. This is in reference to someone who is a very haughty person, who's a very kind of arrogant and very pompous person, and a very aggressive person in his nature. These people will may get their way initially, but their names will be destroyed. Udelo Mosif, and one who does not add to his knowledge, Yosef, causes it to cease. Udelo Yoleif, and one who does not study the Torah, deserves Katlal Chayav, deserves death. Udeyesh Temayesh Betaga Cholef, and one who makes unworthy use of the crown of learning shall pass away. So a very strong word by Hillel, basically saying that firstly he says in the Mishnah 12, love peace and pursue it. It's not only enough just to love peace, you actually have to go out of your way to pursue peace. So he would, it's not good enough to be an armchair lover of peace. You must make an effort to make peace between people and draw them towards a Torah. And in the second Mishnah, number 13, he says that someone who is too brutish in his manner will gain a little bit of respect, because people are are kind of forced to do things that this brutish guy requests, but he will lose his name because of his attitude. People don't want that sort of attitude. You must be humble. Also, he says that you have to keep studying. You have to always add to your learning. You must not be happy and say, I have learnt enough and therefore I will stop learning and I'm happy with what I know. You must keep adding to your studies, otherwise you lose what you've learnt. And also, one who makes unworthy use of the crown shall pass away. You must not use your role as a rabbi or something, or as someone who has attained a good knowledge of Torah to some specific advantage that is not
mandated, worthwhile.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michael. That was a very interesting episode. And with this, we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much.